So this study and this IRB approval was requested by Professor Alan Lipscomb at California State University, Northridge. And of course, the job of reviewing and laying out the information and data from the survey was facilitated by Ms. Montgomery from the BUILD mentorship program. She's a research assistant, or was a research assistant at California State University, Northridge at the time of this survey. The survey instrument was developed and designed by both Professor Lipscomb and myself, and distribution was through the effort of yours truly. I distributed this survey instrument in both Jamaica and Ghana. And when I say I distributed, I was instrumental in having the survey distributed. The topic on the discussion for our purposes, I guess maybe before I get to the topic, I should identify the goals for our session today. To share information about the result of the survey, to do some comparison on not all the measures, but on some of the measures between Ghanaian and Jamaican men, where I encourage people to look at some of these differences because some are glaring, some are very similar. Certainly, I hope by the time we get there that we'll have more participants. So we'll have some audience members share their own practice tips for working with men that are grieving. And then I will offer a few practice tips for application, bearing in mind local values, standard, and approaches. And then finally, I'll share the perspective of a man who has been practicing with men for more than 25 years. This is in the form of a short video. So that constitutes the goal for today's presentation. Of course, the topic is about responding to significant losses as Ghanaian and Jamaican men. And the focus of this presentation is on Ghanaian men. And so that's where it will be, except in the instances where I'm doing the comparison, like we'll primarily be talking about Ghanaian men. And I think I should more accurately say that the survey, as you'll see in a few slides, most of the respondents were from Kumasi region. And so the respondent identified as Akan. So it's not even accurate to say Ghanaian men, since most of the respondents are from a particular region. And this just has to do with convenience for distributing the surveys. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So by way of introduction then, let me just say that many respected clinicians and researchers have had discussion about how to understand the meaning of grief and that it is deeper than just reacting to a loss. If we think of a psychological spectrum, you can have self-inflicting symptoms after one has experienced loss. And the psychologist talks about distress that can occur in the individual. And these kind of distress could include things like suicide, separation anxiety, self-neglect, or the immune system is impacted. I share information on some of the people who have done this kind of research. So grief can then contain dimensions of physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions, as it were, or reaction or manifestation. So limited research in both the USA and Jamaica, and by extension, Ghana, has created a kind of situation where there is disparity in the provision of services and also for clinical efficacy as concerning working with men who are dealing with grief. Personally, I'm not in a position to hazard too much of a guess about the situation here in Ghana, but it would not be surprising to me if there is a dearth of research about men and grief and grieving because of cultural and traditional expectation about men and how it might affect awareness as well as treatment. For this particular study, what was done in both Jamaica and in here in Ghana, and I keep saying Ghana, but the truth is it's more here in the Kumasi region. We designed this instrument, and it was distributed to 508 persons. In Ghana here, overall, 437 male participants completed the survey. 157 of those were in Jamaica and 280 here in Ghana. Now, so there were a series of 11 questions about their experiences in responding to a significant loss in their life. And we used some identification and background questions, such as race and ethnicity. And, both in Jamaica and here, in most instances, we're talking about Black men who would be participating. And we'll see in a minute, like we had a breakdown in terms of tribal affiliation, what those were. So questions that help to identify what the participants were going through during their experiences of loss of a beloved one and how they responded to these loss. The focus then of this study is on the 280 men who participated in this survey here in Ghana. And as I mentioned before, we will have some comparison between Jamaican men and Ghanaian men. And this is just to inform the discussion on the review. So when the question was asked, what's your tribal affiliation for the men in Ghana? Like you can see, we have low percentage for, how do you pronounce this? Is it ganja or janga? Somebody could jump in and tell me the proper. Prof, you want to tell?
That's ganja. Ganja.
Ganja, okay. That's okay. And then Ewe, but you can see Akan was like 94%. So let's kind of view this as the response then of Akan men. In terms of age range, we had a low percentage of 66 and over, 2.5%, 56 to 65 years, 4.3. Notice the higher percentage would be 34% were for men 19 to 25. We had 23% for 26 to 35 and 19% for men aged 14 to 18. Now, there could be a number of reasons for this. One, Ghana is like a young country. And by young, I mean like you have like a lot of people in low age range. But also it could be the people who were distributing the survey, maybe they approach younger men. Because if you look at the situation in Jamaica, where I use people who I'm associated with to distribute the survey, 80% of the men were 46 years or older. Only 20% were 45 years and younger. So again, it could be a number of reasons why this is so. And I think primarily it has to do with who distributed the survey, who people felt comfortable approaching to complete the survey. 93% are younger than 46 in this survey. The question about education level, about 46% had completed secondary or high school, 39% college, and 10% like only primary. Again, I suspect this might be related to who the persons sharing the survey with who they approached and who they found conveniently to share the survey. I want to introduce a little element here where, and it's just a few of us still, but I want us to maybe see individually here how we'd react to like just a few questions. So this is going to be an anonymous poll on the question of some of the questions related here. So let me open the poll, and when this appears on your screen, just go ahead. We're not asking for any identifying information. Just go ahead and answer the three questions, three easy questions, and then we'll go from there. So about 20 seconds more, and we'll close it. I'll share the result. We'll get back to it. I think most people said sadness and despair. It depends. It can be unpredictable. And I like the 50-50. Should men be able to deal with grief and loss easier than women? It's an interesting one. Okay, so like we'll come back to this after we have looked further at how Ghanaian men deal with this. So the question is, how do you respond to a significant loss? That is death in your life. 30% of the respondents said by acceptance, and an overwhelming percentage, 68%, said with sadness and despair. And note the 2% withdrawal, not to be overlooked. And then I'm doing a little comparison here between Jamaican men and Ghanaian men. And I want you to kind of note, because some of these are, I think, significant. Withdrawal for Jamaican men is at 6%, withdrawal for Ghanaian men at 2%. Now, acceptance for Jamaican men is at 49%, compared to Ghanaian men, 30%. And then sadness and despair, while it's at 68%, for Jamaican men, it's at 43%. So I think there are some significant differences here, and that could just be an interesting topic to be breaking down. So continue on then with Ghanaian men, looking at the question, where do you go following a significant loss, say death in your life? 24% go to mom, 7% go to father, 9% there's no one. And again, I'd encourage us maybe to hold that number in abeyance. 9% of men who are grieving, who responded to the survey, didn't have anyone that they think they could go to. Faith in God, 24%, and spouse, 6.5%. And I suspect that we have that low number here because a lot of men were younger in the survey and they might have no spouse at all. And then friends, 10%. So, the high ones would be mother, 24%, faith in God, 24%. And then we have 13, 10, and 9 for siblings, friends, and no one. And I think, yes, I have a comparison between Jamaican men, and some numbers are similar. Some, again, are significantly different. And we could be dealing with things like the age differences between Jamaican men and Ghanaian men. I'm sure some of this is cultural, and some of it might be, your guess is as good as mine. Faith in God for Jamaican men, 33%, higher than for Ghana, which is very surprising to me. Very, very surprising, because, my sense is Ghana is a much more religious place than Jamaica. But we rival you with the number, with churches everywhere and faith being practiced everywhere. So that one is surprising to me. The other one, to note, 30% talk to their spouse. And again, because these are older men, it's more likely that they're married. Note no one. Ghanaian men, 9%. Jamaican, 6.4. That's really kind of similar. Mother and father, for Jamaican men, it's almost equal in terms of the number here. For Ghanaian men, mother 25%, 24%, and father 7.2. So there's a significant difference. And again, age might be the factor here where maybe a lot of these Jamaican men might have no mother because, we had a higher percentage of them were over the age of 45 and definitely even over the age of 65. So those could account for the reason for that. The question of how long it takes to adjust to the loss of a loved one, Ghanaian men, and I have to ask you to hold in abeyance these numbers because I think it's significant. 19% never adjusted, 3 to 4 months, 39%, 5 to 10 years, 11%, 6 months to a year, 31%. And just doing a little comparison here, which I think might be significant. Jamaican men, 22% never adjusted. Ghanaian men, 19% never adjusted. So we could say that is similar. 3 to 4 months, Ghanaian men, 39% to recover. Jamaican men, I mean, 3 to 4 months that they take to recover, 39%. Jamaican men, about 30% say take them 3 to 4 months. And the 5 to 10 years, 16% for Jamaican men, and Ghanaian men, 5 to 10 years, 11%. There might be some similarity here, but the number I'd hold in abeyance here is the never adjusted, because what that tells me is that a lot of hurt men walking around that we should be aware of. A lot of hurt men walking around. Initially, when you're told at the loss, what about the loss? Did you cry? 37% says no. 63% says yes. Compared to Jamaican men, 55% did not cry, while only 45% cried. Those are significantly different numbers, and the reason for could be, again, age and experience, etc. Next slide is about at what age did you experience a significant loss? We notice the younger age kicking in here, only 3%, 60 and up, and 10%, 36 to 59 for Ghanaian men. And I didn't do a comparison here with Jamaica, but again, people experience these loss younger, and so maybe there might be more time for recovery. Not maybe, but there certainly is. And then the next question is, which of the following best describe how someone close to you would identify your reaction to a significant loss? And I think this is an important question in the sense that you might have a certain perception of how well you're coping, but others around you see you differently and might have a different perception. So about 8% say all the above, and all the above include things like content and acceptance, tearful, withdrawn, angry, etc. 6% think that it'd be perceived as angry. 58% think that it'd be perceived as tearful. 20% think that they'll be seen as content and accepting of the transaction. When we do a comparison between Ghanaian men and Jamaican men, the number that I bring attention to is the tearful. For Jamaican men, it's 31%. For Ghanaian men, it's 58%. And I don't know if that has to do with age, experience, culture, societal norm, or what might be. There's a big difference between perception of withdrawal between Jamaican men and Ghanaian men. 8% for Ghana, 17% for Jamaica. And then contentment and acceptance, 20% for Ghanaian men, while 35% think that they're perceived as being accepting of what has transpired. Let me get to like some of the words or expressions that people used in describing their experience. And I'm talking primarily here, about, I could just say Akan men, since they constitute the majority. As depressed, we heard things like something to help us think. We don't do well with handling grief. Speaking of men, and I don't know if that was thinking of Akan men, Ghanaian men, or just men in general. Difficult for people to completely forget about death of a loved one. I get into drinking and abusing it as well. Human beings are nothing. Another one said, very painful. I nearly had high blood pressure. Not sure how you nearly had high blood pressure, but maybe the person had high blood pressure. I'm still in pain. I can't get out of this lot. This is maybe the essence of the information I'll provide with regards to the survey that was done here. And this is where we haven't grown the size of the crowd much, but I'm going to ask for especially professionals among us to share after I talked a little about possible next step, and then we'll kind of take it from there. Based on the result of this survey, in my judgment, there's obvious room for intervention of professionals to help Ghanaian men cope with grief and to make them feel more comfortable in their time of need. The challenge for the mental health professionals will be, finding techniques and strategies to communicate with men and to make them know and feel that they are being heard and that their needs for grieving are being validated. I'm going to ask us to, let me stop sharing here for a minute. I'm going to ask us to maybe share your own experience based on the topic on the discussion. I'll ask individuals to, and we can do round because, it's not a large number of us. So the first question that I'd like to ask is, do you work with men who are dealing with grief issues? What kind of service do you provide? And then, even if you do not work with in this area, but you have thoughts as to what could be done in terms of professional working with these people, give us 2 bullet points to add to a mix here of your idea as to what we could do for men who might be grieving. And I'll ask you to unmute your video, unmute your mic, and share with us. So 1, are you working in this field? Just tell us a little what you're doing. And then 2, just share some bullet points with us as to your own suggestion of what we could do for men who are dealing with the issue of grief.
Okay. I just want to say that I'm not a practitioner on the field, though, but here in Ghana, if you take men who visit social workers, I must say about 70 to 80%, I may be wrong, are just domestic issues on child custody, and you hardly find men, especially when you are talking about the accounts here, as you are studying the pics, going to see a social worker for help in terms of grieving. Because like our culture depicts that man must be seen as tough and strong, and to go to a social worker who might be, say, younger as your daughter, to go and express your emotions, you hardly find one in Kumasi here or around among that. So it is a problem that we need to open up, and I'm urging social workers on the field to go up there to educate men that it is also a healing process, a therapy, and therefore we should start thinking about it. Personally, this is very eye-opening to me, because hardly would you find somebody like that going to social worker for issues about grief to seek assistance. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And Diana, I see your hand. So let's see if Nadia is ready to go, and then we'll come to Diana.
Good afternoon, Prof. and everybody.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for the information. I would say that this is timely information. Recently, we had the Association of Ghana Association of Social Work, Psychology, released some results saying that some about almost 2 million people in Ghana affected by mental health. I will get the right data. I attended the meeting. Mental health itself and grief, including grief, is somehow a taboo even to talk about. So, well, this information is valuable. It's a taboo, but now the Association of Psychology releasing that data or information, it was a big eye-opening. That was last week, recently, last week. So this is an additional thing, and I would say that thank you so much. Looking at the result, I was following seriously the result from the data, your data. Yes, I think there's a lot of intervention can be done regarding mental health. I think therapy is one. Before even we go to grief, we need to deal with our trauma. Before even the grief, trauma is there. People need to be trained, especially social workers, because I'm speaking on behalf of social workers. Right. Social workers should be trained in trauma-centered therapy before we lead men to grieving itself. We need to traumatize, because when somebody loses a loved one, or for instance, or anything, separation and anxiety and all those things, the first thing is the image is that's disturbing the person. So that has to do with the trauma. So we need to train the social workers in trauma-centered therapy, and also the counseling, the grieving aspect of it. So, beyond that, we need education. Awareness creation and sensitization is very, very important. I think for now, I would like to stop here, but it's very interesting. I've been doing counseling and all those things, and they're both men and women and boys and girls. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so on my side, I quite agree with the first two people who spoke. I'm in Ghana, and when you look at our context, I would say socialization have a role to play to how the typical Ghanaian man mourns, in the sense that when you look at our upbringing, as a child, you meet people telling you that you are a man, you don't have to cry, to the sense that even when a child goes to school and the teacher even canes this child and the child is crying, they'll tell you, oh boy, don't cry, be strong, you have to be strong. And being someone who had worked with the Department of Social Welfare before, I would say that you meet, in most of the cases that are reported to the agency, are the women coming in. And when these men come in and you invite the men to come, you realize that the man is even going through a lot of traumatic experience than the woman who had actually come to lodge the complaint. So just to say that I think our society have not given that space to men to freely share the pain they are going through. Because if you are a man, you cannot openly feel free to share whatever agree or whatever situation you are passing through, because you are expected to be strong, because you are, in quotes, the head of the family. So you need to have a position of the stronger person to protect at this. So just like the other person said, as professionals, I think there's a need for us to be trauma informed in providing our services. There's a need for us to also go out there and really educate people on some of these issues. For Ghana example, people don't even know the work of social workers. People even don't know what social work is at the first place. You meet people and you tell them you're a social worker, and excuse me to say, they divert you to think you're a social worker or even a teacher or something like that. So, as professionals, I think we have a lot to do to help someone who is going through grieving. One thing we can do is actually giving the person a listening ear, not you being judgmental, and trying to tell the person how to grieve. People grieve the way they want to. So, as professionals, we should be careful when we are helping people who are going through any kind of grief.
Thank you, Diana. Anyone else want to share and maybe give us a couple of bullet points for approaching this? So while you're thinking about this, let me share then a few thoughts on whatever practice you're doing, whether you're a professional practitioner or a lay person, to think about, because I know sometimes when, say, if I have a friend who had somebody close to them die, I kind of feel helpless. I'm not sure what to do and what to say. I'm trying to respect the person's space. I'm trying not to traumatize more. So I'm not sure what to do. And what I'll share with you are a few ideas from and the recording of this that I'll share with you. I'll add some additional information that not presented here, but expand on some practice tips, especially based on some of the work that my co-author in this, Professor Lipscomb, work that he has done. And I should give you a little background on him and why we decided to do this survey here. He had done work. He's a social worker and a psychologist by training, a licensed practicing psychologist also, and a social work clinician with a license. And he had been doing work with men for a while. And then we had the killing of George Floyd. I mean, I know even here in Ghana, you guys heard about the murder of George Floyd. And so he decided right on the spot to do some surveys. And no, actually, it was not even George Floyd. It was a guy in Sacramento before George Floyd. He did some surveys with men right there to talk about what they were experiencing. And then when George Floyd died, he did some more surveys. So he was building on his data. And he came up with this approach he called the BRUH, B-R-U-H. And so he does offer some suggestion for practice with men based on that approach. And he continues to do this. And I said to him, maybe we should do some surveys in Ghana and in Jamaica to see how men in these cultures are dealing with the issue of grief. Because, we know in both of these cultures, men are supposed to be strong and not show. And I want to make this point, while somebody else was speaking earlier, I thought about this, that it's going to be a long process to change how people think about how men should behave in a society. Because, like we're talking about hundreds of years of culture. And so it's not something that's going to change in a year's time or 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. But what each of you can do as individuals is have a deliberate attitude and value around how you see men and what you expect of them. To know that men hurt, grieve, and have a lot of pain, just like women do. Because, like God made us with feelings. If And when the opportunity isn't given for them to express these feelings in a meaningful way, then they'll express them in antisocial way. And that's why men are so violent. So it is about taking one man at a time to start adjusting how we think about, how we see, and how we approach men who are in pain. So in the interest of time, I respect the time for people who want to stay back after I've shared like a couple other things, which will take maybe another 5 to 7 minutes. Please, like I'd love for us to stay and engage. So let me go back to sharing my screen to share a few thoughts on doing this kind of work with men who are grieving. The first thing that I want to say is to encourage centering activities at the start of any engagement or session. So let's just say you're meeting with a group of young men who are playing soccer, but like you kind of want to get them centered, and just to be focused and to be attentive before they go do what they do, or like you are a church, because a lot of people are involved with church, and like you're doing Sunday school. When you get your audience, so to speak, you can work on things like breathing exercises. You can talk about meditation. You can talk about providing mood music, to get people centered, relaxed. You can talk about prayer, because again, if it's church, you can pray and focus on this. So whatever you do in encouraging centering activities, it should be guided. And the idea of centering the activity is to get people in the space and in this place where they're focused on now in a very calm way. And then the issue of feelings, the issue of pain, the issue of hurt can come up without rushing it. Guided imagery, I use meditation, I use mood music a lot. And even when I'm dealing with only Christians, prayer is not my first go-to, because everybody pray. But what I usually do is like just bring strategies to help people get in that space. I'll do a lot of meditation. I ask people to close their eyes. I use guided imagery, and the music is key, because if you really get people to be relaxed and to be centered, then people are more comfortable talking about things that are difficult to talk about. The activity. And remember, it doesn't have to be a therapeutic session. It doesn't have to be counseling. It can be just any opportunity you get to bring people together to talk. The research has shown this, that the most, the therapeutic sessions that get the best results aren't necessarily dependent on the training, the background, or the experience of the therapist. The best result come from the ability of the therapist to connect with the client. But if they are able to connect with the client, then trust is built, and that client is more than willing to share their life experiences. And in a lot of instances, what clients need is for the helper to listen and to affirm the experience that they're having. So which take us to the next one here of listening. Listen to honor the lived and living experiences of men or youth that you are engaging with, who are dealing with grief. Like just listen, like, tell me like how you're feeling now about your mom that died 5 years ago. How did you feel then when she died? What was the experience 3 years later? Like, have them kind of like dig in and reflect, and then share with you what it is that they experience. Again, it's about honoring what they bring to the table. Believe their truth. And this is really important, even if and especially when you cannot make sense of it based on who you are or based on your own experience. And not say things like, man, but you should be strong. You're a man. I didn't cry. Like, they don't want to hear about your story. They want to tell you their story. So believe and honor their truth that they bring to the experience, even if it's very different from yours. And then we say here to recognize when you're taking up space in a session that is decentering their truth. And what I mean by that is, do not switch the focus from the person who's telling their story to yours or to others. Keep the focus on the truth of the person who is grieving. So be mindful of when you decenter the person's story. Do not over-occupy the space as the helper. Pain and loss and focusing on your needs isn't necessarily helpful, but the focus should be on the person who is grieving and the one you're trying to console, not on you. Just allow the person to tell their truth and keep the focus on them. And then I say, consider and be critical of how you're trying to help. Pay attention to words, to body language, to gestures, and to ensure that you're present in the moment, that you're present with the person, and that you're engaging with them. So the norms and the practices here. And so be very attentive to the moment. We say avoid stereotyping and generalizing about the feelings being expressed. Just have the person name the feeling. Have the person name the feeling that they're having. And again, encourage the person to feeling that they're experiencing, and be comfortable if the person gets silent on you. If it is, you don't have to fill the space. Allow the person to breathe. Remember that listening is certainly a way to honor a person's expression and to honor their lived experiences. So those are some of the things that I'd share. And as I indicated earlier, no discussion about working or supporting those who are grieving, based on our discussion, men who are grieving, without the discussion of spiritual Bible-based support. And for me as a Christian, this is essentially this as a person of faith. And if you're working with somebody who's a person of faith, it is true for them. Now, if you're working with a Muslim and you're a Christian, faith can still be the basis of the things that you say. I'm going to share with you, as my final thought, a video of a guy who has been working with men for 25 years. Hear what he has to say, and then we'll stop here. Certainly, I'll stop the recording, allow for people who need to go, and those who can still stay back and want to continue a conversation, we can certainly do that. So let me share this brief video. It's only 3 minutes long, and I'll end here.
Loss is an unavoidable part of the human experience, and yet it's not something we tend to talk about openly. Why do you think that is? Well, the most obvious answer that probably anybody would give you is that it's painful, and pain is intimidating to most of us, if not all of us. It's unpleasant, and it's difficult because we often don't have the language to express accurately what we're feeling when we're in pain, and I think even worse, we don't really have the language that we need that's accurate to express what we feel when we're trying to support somebody. And so regardless of which side you're on, I think there's a language issue that makes it difficult. And it's when you have language issues, it means that you get into areas where a lot of misunderstandings can arise, because misinterpretations can happen in terms of how people are actually feeling and where they actually are in their process. So I think that has a lot to do with it. It's particularly difficult for men because we've typically been socialized not to be vulnerable, not to reveal ourselves, not to express difficult states, not to ask for help. And one of the reasons that men don't ask for help is because they're all too often used to being told no when they do ask, whether that's as boys or as adults. The services and the resources that are available for men that are grieving and dealing with loss are pretty thin. And I think also that there are some well-intentioned, well-meaning efforts out there that attempt to be helpful to men, but miss the mark, perhaps because they don't understand what a tentative, intimidating process it is for a man to open up, show those feelings of grief and loss actively, as opposed to just talking about them and even know what to ask for. So it's kind of a two-sided thing. I think that the service providers don't have a good understanding of what men actually need and what their process is like, and it can appear very glacial from the outside, as if nothing's actually happening. And men tend to express themselves in different modes and at different paces than a woman might under those circumstances, for reasons of socialization, physiology, culture, you name it, and childhood experience as well. A lot of men have had terrible experiences. I'm one of them. As boys, you reach a certain point where expressing vulnerability, crying, showing sensitivity, showing anything other than being tough and hard and capable can really get you a lot of derogatory, critical, sometimes abusive attention.
All right, so I close with this thought. A smart man once said, by the way, this was not a therapist, but a mediator. And this is what I want you to kind of think about. Speak to people in such a way that they want to listen, and listen to people in a way that they want to speak. If you're working with men that are grieving, talk to them so that they'll hear you and listen to you, and certainly listen to them in a way that they always want to speak to you. So let's talk about centering as practice and expectation. Centering is a technique whose aim is to increase and focus attention and energy. It is to provide relief from stress and anxiety, or both. There are various practices. For example, there's meditation and yoga, and these emphasize centering as a way of focusing attention on the process of breathing in order to slow it down or to regulate it. When we center ourselves, we bring calm to our emotions. We do so by slowing down our breathing so that we, quote, feel, end quote, more of what's going on around us. We feel more of what's going on around us. When we center ourselves, we bring ourselves to calm our emotion. So becoming centered is a way to find peace within the chaos that might be surrounding us. It's about being in check with what's going on. The idea of being grounded and centered is more of an emotional control state. So the effort is to get one connected with one's feelings, but in a calm way. Parenthetically, not being anxious or nervous or angry. It's similar to mindfulness. It is a position where you are connected to how you're feeling, what you're thinking. You feel in control of these thoughts and emotion. And so again, I'm talking about centering as practice and expectation because earlier on I talked about the importance of starting with centering activities. And so the effort here then is to explicate the ideas behind centering and what it is that we're thinking of. So, how does one stay centered? I'll say listen without judgment, practice listening without judgment, practice praying or yoga or meditation. Use whatever people bring to the conversation. If a Christian, use prayer. Non-believer, use relaxation or breathing exercises. You can never go wrong in doing relaxation or breathing exercise, whether a person is religious or not, or share your religion. Or I should say, keep a journal of successes and mistakes. Right as soon as you wake up, take the mirror test to stay centered. Give yourself a recess, a break, like at school. Exercise. Think of exercise that will not necessarily bring harm to your body. Carry a totem. For me, I always listen to music when I walk or at the gym or in the car. So that's my totem, music listening. So those are some kind of explanation of what we're thinking about when we're talking about centering as practice and expectation. So this model, and I think I'd mentioned Dr. Lipscomb, who is a social worker and a psychologist, and we designed the instrument for this research, and he did the bulk of the work with the analysis, and his administrative assistant sort of put the data together. So what I've shared, this is where the credit goes, and the model that I'm going to share here is using the WHAT acronym, WHHAAT, and again, sharing ideas about how to use different approaches in working with men who might be grieving. Let's take the WHAT approach. This is the acronym WHAT, WHHAAT. And so, according to research done by Dr. Alan Lipscomb as psychologist and clinical social worker, there's some common grief reaction among African American men, and I suspect there are common reaction among Ghanaian men, among men from Akan men, since most of the people responding to the survey here in Ghana were Akan. And so that is used, the WHAT acronym that is used in the US. I think there can be some transposition of ideas based on this approach here in Ghana. And remember, practice is always contextual. So you have to determine what is applicable within this context. But so I'm just sharing the model in a generic way, and local practitioners can certainly decide what can be used and what can be discarded. So with that said, let's start with the W, where people might do withdrawal or avoidant behavior. So when men are grieving, there might be this need to pull away in order to deal with the pain associated to the loss or death of others. So you might see people not being as active, not participating as much, but there might be the need for that withdrawal or avoidant behavior. Then there's the hyper being on guard and constantly scanning the environment due to being male in the society. You're not supposed to show pain. You're not supposed to show hurt. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be holding up the family, not cowering away and being depressed or being down. So again, there might be just this, and the word here should be hypervigilant, not hyper. So hypervigilant is the word. So being on guard and constantly scanning of the environment due to being male. The next H here would be honor, pride, and respect. Paying respect to the person who has died in ways that are affirming. So, example, people might do mural, community altars, wearing T-shirts with a person's name and picture. And I know in Ghana here, people who can afford it have big billboards with information about the person that died. So not everybody can afford big billboards, but allow for ways to honor the dead, and this can be done in simple ways, and some of them expressed here. Doing community altar murals, wearing T-shirts with a person's name and picture, etc. Then the A here, the first A, is for acceptance. Having come to terms with the finality of the loss and the death, be it due to cultural learning or making peace with the loss. So, find ways to bring acceptance into being. Some people do that through elaborate celebrations. Some people like just time away, whatever that might be. And this is maybe the therapeutic part that he identifies for the A, activism, exercising your right for justice for persons who have died unjustly. So if a family member was murdered, this might be the time for you to get on a bandwagon, get with a group that might be against violence in the community. If the person died from diabetes, that might be the struggle. I have a sister that died from breast cancer. So people might get active in Cancer Awareness Week or day or month, or might help raise money to fight cancer. So whatever the activism might be, people decide based on their circumstances. But it is a way to utilize one's passion and channeling aggression to be seen and heard in order to bring about systemic change. And then the T is for terror. So due to being targeted, feelings of fear, anxiety, and possible paranoia due to witnessing others being dying unnecessarily or unjustly. And again, it could be a murder. It could be dying from preventable diseases. It could be dying because the person wasn't treated at the hospital because there wasn't a bed available or the wait was too long. So, for example, too many people die on the continent from mosquito-borne diseases. So if more effort were made, for example, to have a drainage system that work where water didn't become stagnant to breed mosquitoes that can then affect people and sometimes fatally. So like you see how the activism and terror could be manifested in different ways. And so the idea again is to think creatively, locally, in using the WHAT acronym as a means of working with men that are dealing with grief. We said it before that every solution proposed is always contextual. It's always local. Even though people come from abroad with these ideas, you have to determine whether or not it applies and can work here. And so I close with something I said during the presentation, that a smart man once said, and he's not a therapist but a mediator, speak to people in such a way that they want to listen, and listen to people in such a way that they want to speak. I really encourage you to adopt your practice. Adopt your practice to your situation or circumstance, and develop the skill set for listening effectively so that people really want to speak, and develop your ability to speak and engage so that people will really want to hear what it is that you have to say.